Welcome to David's Stories. Today we follow Thomas Mitchell, a grieving father humiliated by his daughter-in-law who reclaims his home, exposes her assumptions, and restores his dignity. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly videos uncovering truths and strength. Share your thoughts below. Let's start the stories. The rain was relentless that day, hammering the roof of the old chapel like 1,000 fists demanding entry. Inside, the air was thick with grief, the kind that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel like a betrayal of the one you've lost. My son David was gone. A car accident, they said. A twist of fate on a slick road at midnight, stealing him from me at 35. I stood by his casket, my hands trembling, my gray suit damp from the storm outside, and I tried to hold on to the memory of his laughter, bright, unyielding like sunlight breaking through clouds. But the weight of his absence crushed me, and the tears came unbidden, silent but unstoppable. That's when she spoke. Victoria, my daughter-in-law, her voice slicing through the murmurs of mourners like a blade through silk. "Stop crying, Thomas. Pack your bags and get out of my house, now!" The words hung in the air, sharp and cold, as every head in the chapel turned. I froze, my hand still resting on the polished oak of David's casket. The mourners, neighbors, friends, distant cousins, stared, their whispers fading into a stunned silence. Victoria stood there, her black dress tailored to perfection, her auburn hair pulled back in a way that screamed control. She was a vision of authority, a queen claiming her throne in the midst of my sorrow. But her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, betrayed something darker. Something I hadn't seen before, or perhaps had chosen to ignore. "Excuse me," I said, my voice low, barely audible over the rain. "You heard me," she snapped, stepping closer, her heels clicking on the stone floor. "This isn't your home anymore. David's gone, and I'm not carrying your burden. You're done here." The word burden hit like a physical blow. I felt it in my chest, a tightening that made it hard to breathe. The mourners shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, others staring with pity or disbelief. Helen Davis, my neighbor for nearly 4 decades, clutched her purse, her eyes wide with shock. But no one spoke. No one dared challenge the woman who had taken charge of David's funeral with the precision of a general who now stood before me, claiming my home as her own. I could have argued. I could have shouted the truth that the house on Maple Street, the one I'd built with my own hands in 1987, was mine. That the $850,000 she thought she'd inherited was locked in a trust I controlled. That every brick, every beam, every memory in that house belonged to me, not her. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I met her gaze, my tears drying on my cheeks, and I said nothing. Silence, I've learned, can be a weapon sharper than words. It unsettles, it unnerves, and it buys you time to plan. Victoria mistook my silence for surrender. She turned to the mourners, her voice softening but still commanding. "Tom's struggling, as you can see. It's been hard for him since Margaret passed. David was supporting him, and now—" She trailed off, letting the implication hang, poor, helpless old man lost without his son. The mourners nodded sympathetically, their pity a bitter pill I swallowed without protest. Let them think what they wanted. Let her think she'd won. The truth was a storm brewing on the horizon, and I was content to let it gather strength. As I left the chapel, the rain soaking through my suit, I felt the weight of something else. A key, heavy and cold, tucked in my pocket. It wasn't just the key to the house on Maple Street. It was the key to a secret I'd kept for decades, one Victoria would never suspect. And as I stepped into the storm, I made a promise to David, to Margaret, to myself. I would reclaim what was mine, not with shouts or fists, but with the quiet power of truth. The house on Maple Street stood like a sentinel against the gray sky, its colonial facade unchanged since the day I drove the first nail into its frame. I'd built it with Margaret, my wife, in 1987 when we were young and full of dreams. Every corner held a memory: the living room where David took his first steps, the kitchen where Margaret perfected her apple pie, the basement where I'd hidden secrets that even she never fully understood. It was more than a house. It was a testament to a life we'd built together, a life Victoria was trying to erase. I stood in the foyer, shaking off the rain, and felt the silence of the house wrap around me. It wasn't the comforting silence of home anymore. It was the silence of a battlefield charged with the tension of a war I hadn't chosen. Victoria had been living here since she married David 8 years ago, treating it like her personal kingdom. She'd rearranged furniture, replaced Margaret's curtains with sleek modern ones, and boxed up David's childhood mementos as if they were clutter. But today her presence felt heavier, more invasive, like a shadow stretching across my memories. She wasn't home yet. The funeral reception was being held at a nearby community center. She'd insisted on it, claiming the house wasn't presentable for guests. I knew better. She wanted control, wanted to keep me on the sidelines, an old man to be pitied rather than respected. I wandered into the kitchen, my boots leaving damp footprints on the hardwood I'd laid myself. The table, a battered oak piece Margaret and I had found at a garage sale, stood unchanged, a relic of a simpler time. I sat down, my fingers tracing the familiar scratches, and let my mind drift to the first hint of trouble. It started 2 months ago, the day we got the call about David. A state trooper's voice, clipped and professional, delivering the news that shattered my world. Victoria had been a whirlwind from the moment she heard, taking charge with a speed that felt rehearsed. "Don't worry, Tom," she'd said, her hand on my shoulder, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I'll handle everything." And she did. The funeral arrangements, the obituary, the guest list, she controlled it all, shutting me out with a smile that never reached her eyes. At the time I thought it was grief. I thought she was coping in her own way, asserting order in the chaos of loss. But there were signs, small at first, like cracks in a foundation. She'd dismissed my suggestion to play David's favorite song, Stairway to Heaven, at the funeral, calling it too depressing. She'd chosen every detail, the casket, the flowers, even the eulogy, without asking for my input. And then at the reception, she'd pulled me aside in this very kitchen. "Tom," she had said, her voice low, almost conspiratorial, "we need to talk about your situation." "My situation?" I'd echoed, confused. "You're financially dependent on us now," she said, her eyes flicking over my worn sweater, my scuffed shoes. "David was supporting you, and with him gone." She shrugged, a calculated gesture. "I can't carry that burden." There was that word again, burden. It stung not because it was true, but because it was so far from the truth. It felt like a lie designed to wound. I'd nodded, not out of agreement, but to buy time, to watch, to listen. Victoria saw that nod as weakness, but she didn't know me. She didn't know the man who'd built this house with cash, who'd saved every receipt, who'd created a trust that held more wealth than she could imagine. She saw an old man grieving and alone, and she thought that made me powerless. She was wrong. The reception was a blur of faces and condolences, held in a sterile community center that smelled of coffee and cleaning solution. I stood by the buffet, a plate of untouched sandwiches in my hand, watching Victoria work the room. She moved with the grace of a seasoned real estate agent, shaking hands, offering practiced smiles, accepting hugs with just the right amount of emotion. She was good, too good. Every gesture felt choreographed, every word chosen to reinforce her narrative. The capable widow, the grieving daughter-in-law, the woman taking charge in a time of crisis. I stayed quiet, observing from David's old recliner, the one I'd bought him when he turned 16. It was one of the few pieces of furniture Victoria hadn't replaced, and sitting in it felt like holding on to a piece of him. I listened as she spoke to Helen Davis, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear. "Tom's having a hard time adjusting," she said, her tone dripping with sympathy. "The poor man doesn't understand finances. David handled everything for him." Helen nodded, her eyes flicking to me with pity. She'd known me for 37 years, since the day I broke ground on Maple Street. She'd watched me build the house, watched Margaret plant roses in the garden, watched David grow up. But now even she seemed to believe Victoria's version of reality. That's when it hit me. People see what they expect to see. Victoria expected a broken old man, so that's what she saw. And she was betting on everyone else seeing it too. I could have corrected her then. I could have stood up, walked to the center of the room, and told everyone the truth, that I'd never been dependent on David, that the house was mine, that the money she thought was hers was locked in a trust I controlled. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I sensed there was more to her story. Something hidden, something she wasn't saying. Her confidence was too absolute, her actions too deliberate. It was as if she knew something I didn't, or thought she did. As the guests began to leave, Victoria approached me, her smile tight. "Tom, I meant what I said at the chapel. This arrangement isn't working anymore." I looked around the community center at the folding chairs and plastic tablecloths and thought of my house, the real one on Maple Street. The living room I'd painted 3 times, the hardwood floors I'd laid by hand, the crown molding I'd cut with David when he was just a boy. "I understand," I said, quietly. She tilted her head, studying me. "Good. I've already looked into some senior communities. Sunset Manor has openings. It's affordable, only $800 a month for a studio." $800 a month? I repeated, my voice neutral. "And food, transportation, medical bills. There are programs," she said, waving a hand. "Food stamps, Medicaid. The government takes care of people in your situation. My situation." The phrase grated, but I kept my face blank. She thought I was a charity case, a burden to be offloaded. She wanted me to be grateful for her generosity, for giving me 30 days instead of 0. She wanted me to thank her for not calling the police to drag me out of my own home. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw something else. A flicker of unease, a crack in her perfect facade. She was hiding something, and I intended to find out what. That night, alone in the house, I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, leaving an eerie stillness that amplified every creak of the old floors. I sat at the kitchen table, a single bulb casting long shadows across the room. In my hand was the key, the one I'd felt in my pocket at the chapel. It wasn't just a house key. It was the key to the filing cabinet in the basement, a relic of my days as a CPA, where I'd stored 40 years of secrets. I'd always been meticulous. Margaret used to tease me about it, calling me a squirrel, hoarding acorns for a winter that never came. But those acorns, deeds, bank statements, trust documents were my armor. They were proof of a life built with care, a legacy Victoria was trying to steal. As I sat there, I made a list, not of what I was losing, but of what she thought she was gaining. The house, 400 square feet of memories, worth $420,000. David's life insurance, $150,000 already spent in her mind. My dignity, the one thing she couldn't quantify, but was determined to take. But there was something else on that list, something she didn't know about. The trust. The Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust, with a balance of $853,400. David had been a beneficiary, not an owner. The money, the house, the power, it was all mine. And in the basement, locked in that filing cabinet, was the proof. I stood, the key heavy in my hand, and headed for the basement stairs. The air grew cooler as I descended, the familiar smell of old wood and damp concrete grounding me. The filing cabinet stood against the far wall, a silent sentinel guarding my secrets. I slid the key into the lock, the click echoing in the quiet. Inside were 4 drawers, each labeled by decade. Each a chapter in a story Victoria had never bothered to read. I didn't open it yet. I didn't need to. I knew what was there: the deed from 1987, the trust documents from 1985, the bank statements that would unravel her assumptions. But as I stood in the dim light, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement's dampness. Victoria's confidence wasn't just arrogance. There was something calculated about it, something that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Had David told her something? Had she found something, some document, some hint that made her so sure she could claim everything? I locked the cabinet, and returned upstairs, the key burning in my palm. Tomorrow I'd start digging, not just into my own records but into Victoria's motives. She thought she was playing a game she'd already won, but games have rules, and I was about to change them. As I lay in bed, the darkness pressing against the windows, I thought of David. He'd been a good son, respectful kind, the kind of man who'd learned from his parents' quiet strength. But he'd also been private, keeping his marriage to Victoria separate from the family trust. Had he known something about her? Had he seen the ambition, the ruthlessness that I was only now beginning to understand? The storm outside had passed, but another was coming. Victoria had thrown down a gauntlet, and I was ready to pick it up. Not with anger or vengeance, but with the calm certainty of a man who'd spent a lifetime building something worth protecting. She thought she knew me. She thought she knew the house, the money, the story. But she didn't know the half of it. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't just be about a house or a trust. It would be about who I was and who she'd underestimated. The house was too quiet the morning after the funeral. The kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of black coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the scratches on the oak surface, marks from a lifetime of meals, laughter, and late-night talks with Margaret and David. The table was a relic like me, a survivor of decades. But unlike me, it couldn't fight back against the woman trying to erase its history. Victoria wasn't here. She'd left a note on the fridge scrawled in her sharp, angular handwriting. At the office. Back by noon. We'll talk. The word talk felt like a threat, not a promise. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me, and let my mind wander back to the beginning. To the cracks in the foundation of this mess, cracks I'd seen but chosen to ignore. It started long before David's accident, though I didn't recognize it then. Victoria had come into our lives 8 years ago, a whirlwind of ambition wrapped in charm. She was a real estate agent, sharp and polished, with a smile that could sell a condemned building to a dreamer. David was smitten from the moment he met her at a networking event in Cleveland. "She's got fire, Dad," he'd told me, his eyes bright with the kind of hope I hadn't seen since he was a boy building model rockets in the backyard. I wanted to believe in that fire, wanted to believe she'd be good for him. And for a while she was, or so it seemed. They married quickly within a year in a ceremony I helped fund through the trust. Margaret was still alive then, her cancer in remission, and she'd fussed over the wedding details with a joy that made her seem young again. Victoria had been gracious, thanking us profusely, but there was always something in her eyes, a calculation, a hunger. I chalked it up to her drive, her need to prove herself in a cutthroat industry. But looking back, I wonder if it was something more. Something that had been simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to boil over. When they moved into the house on Maple Street, I welcomed them. It was practical. David was starting his engineering career. Victoria was building her client list, and the house was too big for me alone after Margaret's diagnosis returned. I thought it would be temporary, a way to keep the family close. But Victoria took to the house like it was her birthright. She redecorated without asking, replacing Margaret's floral wallpaper with stark white paint, swapping out the antique chandelier for something sleek and modern. "It's an upgrade, Tom," she'd say, her smile tight. "David agrees, this place needs a fresh start." David never contradicted her, but I saw the way his shoulders tensed when she spoke of updating the house. He'd grown up here, helped me sand the floors, paint the walls, plant the roses with his mother. This was his history as much as mine, but he was caught between loyalty to his wife and the memories we shared. I didn't push him. I didn't want to make him choose. Maybe that was my first mistake. The signs of trouble grew clearer after Margaret's death 2 years ago. Her passing left a hole in my world, a void I filled with routine morning coffee, evening walks, and the quiet work of maintaining the trust. I'd downsized my life, driving an old Honda Civic, wearing the same worn sweaters, clipping coupons, not because I needed to, but because simplicity felt like a way to honor her. Margaret had never cared for flash or status. She'd loved the house for what it meant, not what it was worth. Victoria, though, saw my simplicity as weakness. She saw an old man grieving and alone, and assumed I was broken. David tried to bridge the gap. He'd bring groceries when I didn't ask, mow the lawn without being prompted, drive me to doctor's appointments when my arthritis flared. "You don't have to do this," I'd tell him, but he'd just smile, that same boyish grin he'd had at 16. I want to, Dad. I thought it was love. Victoria thought it was charity. She started dropping hints, subtle at first, then bolder. "David's been so good to you, Tom," she'd say over dinner, her fork poised like a weapon. "Not everyone would take care of their father like this." I'd nod, not correcting her because I didn't want to embarrass David. He knew the truth, that the money for his education, his wedding, his comfortable life came from the trust I'd set up with Margaret before he was born. But he never told Victoria, and I didn't either. Maybe he thought it wasn't her business. Maybe he sensed even then that she wouldn't understand. The real shift came after David's accident. The call came at 2 a.m. The trooper's voice cold and mechanical, like a machine delivering a death sentence. I don't remember much of that night. Just fragments, the phone slipping from my hand. The drive to the hospital, the sight of David's body under a sheet. Victoria was there, dry-eyed, already making calls, already taking charge. "I'll handle the arrangements," she said, and I let her, too numb to argue. But as the days passed, I saw it wasn't grief driving her. It was opportunity. At the funeral home, she made every decision with the precision of a conductor. The casket was mahogany, expensive, but tasteful. The flowers were white lilies, elegant but impersonal. When I suggested Stairway to Heaven for the service, a song David and I had played on repeat while building the house, she cut me off. "Too depressing," she said, her lips pursed. "We need something uplifting, something modern." I didn't argue. I sat in my old gray suit, the one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral, and let her direct the show. But I watched. I listened. And I noticed the way her eyes lingered on the mourners, assessing their reactions, ensuring she was seen as the one in control. The reception at the community center was where the cracks became chasms. Victoria had insisted on hosting it there, claiming the house wasn't suitable for guests. I knew the real reason she didn't want me in the spotlight, didn't want anyone to see the house as mine. She wanted the narrative to be hers, a widow stepping up, a daughter-in-law burdened with an old man's care. I let her have the stage, sitting in David's recliner, the one piece of furniture she hadn't touched, and watched her perform. She moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, offering carefully calibrated tears. I heard her talking to Helen Davis, our neighbor, since the day we broke ground on Maple Street. "Tom's struggling," she said, her voice low but loud enough for me to hear. "David was handling everything for him, finances, bills, you name it. Now that he's gone, it's complicated." Helen's eyes flicked to me, filled with pity. "Poor man," she murmured. "He must feel so lost." Lost. The word stung, but I didn't correct her. I didn't stand up and say I built that house with my own hands. I paid for every nail, every shingle, every memory. I didn't tell her about the trust, the $853,412 sitting in a bank account Victoria didn't even know existed. I didn't mention the filing cabinet in the basement, 4 drawers of meticulously organized documents that could unravel her entire story. Instead, I sipped my coffee and let her words hang in the air, a lie that would soon choke on its own weight. But there was something else in Victoria's performance that set my nerves on edge. It wasn't just her confidence, it was the certainty behind it. She spoke as if she had proof, as if she'd seen something that made her believe the house, the money, everything was hers. Had David told her something? Had she found a document, a will, a scrap of paper that gave her this audacity? The thought gnawed at me, a splinter I couldn't pull out. I needed to know what she knew, or what she thought she knew. Later that evening, after the last guests had left, Victoria cornered me in the community center's kitchen. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her face. She held a manila folder, her fingers tapping against it like a drummer warming up. "Tom," she said, her voice clipped, "we need to talk about your situation." There it was, again, my situation. I leaned against the counter, my hands steady, despite the anger simmering in my chest. What about it? You're financially dependent, she said, her eyes narrowing. David was supporting you. Bills, taxes, groceries. With him gone, I can't keep that up. I've been generous letting you stay in the house, but it's mine now. David left everything to me. I studied her, searching for the source of her certainty. She was a real estate agent. She knew the importance of deeds, titles, legal documents. Yet she stood there claiming ownership without a shred of proof. Or did she have proof? The folder in her hand caught my eye, its edges worn as if she'd been carrying it for days. What was in it? A will, a forged document. Something David had left behind. I kept my voice calm, my face unreadable. You're sure about that? Her lips twitched, a flicker of irritation. Of course I'm sure. David and I discussed it. The house, the money, it's all mine. You need to start looking for somewhere else to live. A senior community, maybe. Somewhere more appropriate. Appropriate, I repeated, letting the word linger. And you've got all this figured out? I've already done the research, she said, opening the folder to reveal a stack of brochures. Sunset Manor has openings, $800 a month for a studio. It's perfect for someone on a fixed income. Fixed income, I said, my tone flat. Like Social Security, exactly. She handed me a brochure, her smile thin. There are programs to help with the rest: food stamps, Medicaid. You'll manage. I took the brochure, my fingers brushing the glossy paper. It was for a senior living facility, all beige walls and forced cheer, the kind of place where people go to disappear. She expected me to live there on $8 a month, to scrape by on government handouts, to thank her for her kindness. But as I looked at her, I saw that flicker of unease again, a shadow in her eyes. She was hiding something, and it wasn't just ignorance. Victoria, I said, folding the brochure in half. You've made a lot of assumptions. They're not assumptions, she snapped, closing the folder with a snap. They're facts. David told me you were struggling. He said he was paying for everything. Did he? I asked, leaning forward slightly. Did he show you the checks, the bank statements? The deed? Her jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. She hadn't seen anything. She was banking on David's word, or what she thought was his word. But there was something in her posture, the way her fingers gripped the folder, that told me she wasn't entirely sure. She was gambling, and I was the one holding the cards. I'll think about it, I said, turning to leave. You have 30 days, she called after me, her voice sharp. November 15th. After that, I'm changing the locks. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. The war had already begun, and I was fighting on my own terms. Back at the house, I couldn't shake the image of that folder. What was in it? A will. A letter. Something David had left behind that gave her this unshakable confidence. I paced the living room, the hardwood creaking under my boots, and tried to piece it together. David had been meticulous in his own way, like me, but he wasn't a details man when it came to finances. He'd trusted me to handle the trust, to manage the money that flowed to him in monthly allowances. Had he told Victoria something that made her think he owned the house? Or was she bluffing, hoping I'd crumble under her pressure? I stopped by the mantel where Margaret's photos used to sit. They were gone now, replaced by a sleek vase that screamed Victoria's taste. I opened a drawer in the sideboard and found them: Margaret's smiling face, David's crayon drawings from kindergarten, my old CPA certificates all stuffed away like relics of a life she wanted to erase. The sight of them lit a fire in me, not of anger, but of resolve. She wasn't just taking my house. She was taking my history, my family, my truth. I went to the basement again, the key heavy in my pocket. The filing cabinet stood in the shadows, its metal surface cold under my touch. I unlocked it, the click loud in the silence, and pulled open the top drawer. Inside were folders labeled by year, each one a chapter in a story I'd written with Margaret. I didn't need to look at them to know what they contained: the deed from 1987, the trust documents from 1985, the bank statements showing $83,412. But as I reached for the folder marked real estate, something caught my eye. A small envelope tucked behind it, one I didn't recognize. It was yellowed, sealed with David's handwriting scrawled across the front. For Dad, if anything happens. My heart stopped. I hadn't seen this before. When had he written it? Why had he hidden it here in my filing cabinet where Victoria would never look? My fingers trembled as I opened it, the paper crackling like dry leaves. Inside was a single sheet dated 6 months ago. Dad, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the pain that brings. There's something you need to know about Victoria. She's not who you think. She's been asking questions about the house, the money, things I never told her. I think she's planning something. I don't know what, but I don't trust her. The trust is yours, always has been. Don't let her take it. Protect what you and Mom built. Love, David. I read it twice, my pulse hammering in my ears. David had known. He'd seen something in her, something I'd missed. But what was she planning? Had she found this letter? Was that why she was so sure, so bold? I tucked the letter into my pocket, my mind racing. This wasn't just about a house or money anymore. This was about betrayal, about a secret David had tried to warn me about. The next morning I drove to Helen Davis's house. She'd been my neighbor for 37 years, a witness to every milestone in my life with Margaret and David. If anyone had seen something, heard something, it would be her. She answered the door in a floral apron, her gray hair pulled back, her smile fading when she saw my face. "Tom, what's wrong?" she asked, ushering me inside. I didn't waste time. "Helen, what has Victoria been saying about me?" She hesitated, her hands twisting the apron. "She's been talking. Says David was supporting you, that you're struggling financially. She told me you're moving to a senior home soon. Did she say anything else?" I pressed. "Anything about the house?" "The money." Helen frowned, thinking. "She mentioned something odd a few weeks ago before the accident. Said she and David were planning to sell the house, move somewhere bigger. I thought it was strange. She said it was their house, not yours. I reminded her you built it, but she just laughed it off." My blood ran cold. Sell the house? David would never have agreed to that. He loved this place, loved the memories it held. Was Victoria planning this before he died? Had she been laying the groundwork, manipulating him, manipulating me? I thanked Helen and left the letter burning a hole in my pocket. By noon, Victoria was back, her heels clicking as she strode into the kitchen. She carried that same manila folder, her eyes narrowing when she saw me at the table. "Tom," she said, her voice clipped. "Have you thought about what I said? I've thought about a lot of things I said, my tone even. Like why you're so sure this house is yours." Her smile faltered, just for a second. "David told me. He inherited it when Margaret died. It's in his will." "His will," I repeated. "Have you seen it?" "I don't need to," she said, but her fingers tightened on the folder. "He told me everything. Did he tell you about the trust?" I asked, watching her closely. Her eyes flickered, a shadow passing over them. "What trust?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her reaction told me enough. She didn't know about the trust, but she was fishing, trying to gauge what I knew. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. "Victoria," I said, "be careful what you assume. Assumptions can cost you." She laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "Don't lecture me, Tom. I'm a real estate agent. I know how property works." "Then you should know to check the deed," I said, and walked out, leaving her standing there, clutching her folder like a lifeline. That night I lay awake, David's letter on the nightstand. His words echoed in my mind. She's not who you think. What had he seen? What had he known? I thought of the folder in Victoria's hands, the certainty in her voice, the unease in her eyes. She was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The house, the trust, the truth, they were mine to protect. And I would not with shouts or threats, but with the quiet power of a man who'd spent a lifetime building something unbreakable. The fog on Maple Street thickened as October bled into November, wrapping the house in a shroud that felt like a warning. Each morning I woke to the same oppressive silence, broken only by the drip of a faucet in the upstairs bathroom, a small persistent sound that mirrored the tension building inside me. Victoria's words at the funeral, her demand that I pack my bags and leave, had lit a fuse, and it was burning faster now. Her confidence, her cruelty, her certainty, they were no longer just insults. They were pieces of a puzzle I was determined to solve. She thought she held all the cards, but I was starting to see the cracks in her hand. I sat at the kitchen table, the oak surface scarred with decades of love and loss, and read David's letter again. She's not who you think. She's been asking questions about the house, the money. I don't trust her. His words were a ghost in the room, urging me to act to protect what Margaret and I had built. But what had Victoria been asking? What did she know or think she knew that made her so bold? The manila folder she'd clutched at the community center, the one she'd waved like a weapon in her office, haunted me. Was it a bluff, or did it hold something real? A will, a forged document, a secret David had kept from me. I tucked the letter into my pocket, next to the key to the basement filing cabinet, and made a decision. I wouldn't confront her yet, not until I understood her game, but I would watch, listen, and wait. Patience had always been my strength, a quiet power Victoria mistook for weakness. She was digging a hole, and I was content to let her keep digging until the moment was right to pull the ground out from under her. The days following our meeting at Premier Realty were a study in escalation. Victoria's presence in the house grew heavier, more invasive, like a storm cloud settling over Maple Street. She didn't just live here now, she claimed it, moving through the rooms with the swagger of a conqueror. Margaret's antique china cabinet, the one we'd bought at an estate sale in 1989, was pushed into a corner of the dining room, replaced by a sleek glass display case that screamed her taste. David's engineering textbooks, dog-eared and cherished, vanished from the den's shelves, swapped for glossy real estate magazines. Even the refrigerator, once a gallery of David's childhood drawings, now held only her meal prep containers and a single magnet advertising her agency. Redecorating, she called it, when I asked about Margaret's photos, now missing from the mantel. David always said this place needed updating. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were sharp, watching for my reaction. I gave her none, just a nod, but inside I felt a fire kindling. Updating, as if 40 years of memories were outdated software to be deleted. As if Margaret's laughter, David's first steps, our life together could be boxed up and forgotten. She gave me a timeline printed on crisp white paper, as if I were a tenant facing eviction. November 15th, she said, pointing to the date circled in red. That gives you time to find a nice senior community. Somewhere more suitable for your situation. That phrase again, your situation, like a knife twisted with every repetition. She handed me another brochure for Sunset Manor, its glossy pages promising vibrant living for seniors with photos of smiling retirees playing bingo. It's only $800 a month, she said, her tone almost cheerful. You'll be fine there. And food? I asked, my voice calm. Transportation, medical bills. She shrugged, dismissing the question with a wave of her hand. There are programs, food stamps, Medicaid. The government takes care of people like you. People like me. The words landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch. She wanted me to feel small, to accept her narrative of a helpless old man. But I saw the truth in her eyes, a flicker of doubt, a shadow of fear. She wasn't as sure as she pretended. She was testing me, probing for cracks in my resolve. And that folder, always in her hand, was starting to feel like a clue to something bigger. The next sign came on a Thursday evening when I returned from a walk to find Victoria in the living room surrounded by boxes. She was packing my things. Photo albums, Margaret's recipe cards, a small wooden box where I kept David's baby shoes, all stacked like garbage waiting for the curb. "What are you doing, Yoas?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She looked up startled, then recovered with a smile. "Helping you get organized, Tom. You'll need to downsize for Sunset Manor. These things won't fit in a studio apartment." I stepped closer, my eyes on the boxes. "Those are mine." "Of course they are," she said, her tone patronizing. "But you can't take everything. I'm just making it easier for you. Easier for me or easier for her to erase me." I picked up the wooden box, my fingers tracing the worn edges, and felt a surge of anger, not hot and reckless, but cold and focused. "Put them back," I said quietly. Her smile faltered. "Tom, be reasonable. You can't stay here. This house is mine now." "Is it?" I asked, holding her gaze. "Have you seen the deed?" She froze just for a moment, then laughed a brittle, nervous sound. "I don't need to see the deed. David told me everything. This house, the money, it's all mine." Everything, I repeated, letting the word hang. "What exactly did David tell you?" Her eyes darted to the manila folder on the coffee table, then back to me. "Enough," she said, but her voice wavered. "He said you were struggling, that he was paying for everything. The taxes, the utilities, the mortgage." "There is no mortgage," I said, my voice steady. "I paid cash for this house in 1987. Her laugh was sharper now, almost desperate. "That was 37 years ago, Tom. Things change. David inherited this place when Margaret died." "Did he?" I asked, stepping closer. "Or is that what you want to believe?" She stood clutching the folder to her chest like a shield. "Stop playing games. You have until November 15th. After that, I'm changing the locks." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her words were a challenge, but her eyes betrayed her, a flicker of uncertainty, a crack in her armor. She was hiding something, and that folder was the key. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing among the boxes, her confidence unraveling like a frayed thread. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office again, the deed to 447 Maple Street tucked in my jacket. I needed to be sure that Victoria hadn't tampered with anything, sure that my ownership was ironclad. The clerk, the same tired-eyed woman from before, pulled the file with a yawn. "Still you, Mr. Mitchell," she said, handing me a fresh copy of the deed. "No changes, no liens, no nothing." "Has anyone else been here?" I asked, my voice low. "Asking about this property." She checked her computer, her fingers sluggish on the keys. "Nope, just you twice now." She paused, squinting at the screen. "Although, there was a request for a property search on Maple Street last week. Not your address, though. 47A, an empty lot next door. Someone was checking its ownership history. 47A, I frowned. The lot next door had been vacant for years, overgrown with weeds. Who requested it?" She shrugged. "Anonymous. Online form. Could be anyone." I thanked her and left the new information buzzing in my mind. Why would Victoria or anyone be interested in the lot next door? Was it related to her plans for my house? Or was it something else entirely? A piece of the puzzle I hadn't yet uncovered. David's letter burned in my pocket. She's been asking questions about the house, the money. Had she been digging into more than just my property? Back at the house, I found another note from Victoria, meeting at the office 2 p.m. "Bring your financial records. No excuses." The imperious tone grated, but I saw it for what it was, a desperate move. She was pushing harder now, sensing my resistance, trying to force me into a corner. But I wasn't the one cornered. She was. At 2 p.m., I walked into Premier Realty, my old Honda, a stark contrast to the polished cars in the lot. The office was a hive of activity agents tapping away at laptops, phones, wringing the air thick with ambition. Victoria sat at her desk, her posture perfect, the manila folder in front of her like a loaded gun. "Tom," she said, her smile tight. "You're late." "Am I?" I said, taking a seat without being asked. "I thought we were having a conversation, not a deposition." Her eyes narrowed, but she kept her composure. "We need to settle this. I've been thinking about your situation, and I need to know exactly what David was covering for you. The mortgage, the taxes, the utilities, everything. I leaned back, studying her. You keep saying David was covering things. Did he show you the bills? The bank transfers, the checks. She hesitated, her fingers twitching on the folder. He didn't have to. It was obvious. He was supporting you. Obvious, I echoed, letting the word linger. You're a real estate agent, Victoria. You know how property works. Have you seen the deed? Her jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers, none of which looked official. Notes, printouts, a few grainy photocopies. David told me you never contributed a dime to this house, she said, her voice sharp. He said he was paying for everything. Did he? I asked, my tone calm but pointed. Or is that what you assumed? Her face flushed, but she pressed on. I'm not assuming anything. I know how this works. David inherited the house when Margaret died. It's mine now. I stood slowly, deliberately. You might want to check your facts before you start changing locks. Her eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else, fear maybe, or doubt. You're in denial, Tom. You can't afford this house. You drive a 15-year-old car. You shop with coupons. You haven't updated anything since the Reagan administration. I smiled a small, quiet smile that made her flinch. Appearances can be deceiving, I said, and walked out, leaving her clutching her folder, her confidence crumbling. That night I couldn't sleep. The house felt alive, its creaks and groans, a chorus of memories urging me to act. I went to the basement, the key cold in my hand, and opened the filing cabinet. The folders were there, as always, a testament to my meticulous nature. But David's letter kept pulling me back. She's planning something. What a sale. A scam. Something tied to the lot next door. I needed answers, and I needed them before November 15th. The next morning I called Helen Davis. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. Tom, you sound different. Everything okay? I need to ask you something, I said, cutting to the chase. Has Victoria mentioned anything about the lot next door, 447A? There was a pause long enough to make my pulse quicken. Funny you mentioned that, she said finally. A few months ago, before David's accident, she asked me about it. Said she was thinking of buying it for a development project, something about a new condo complex. I told her it's been vacant forever, owned by some out-of-state investor. Did she say why she was interested? I asked. Not really, just that it was a good opportunity. But she was intense about it. Kept asking if I knew who owned it, if you'd ever mentioned it. I thought it was odd. Odd didn't begin to cover it. I thanked Helen and hung up, my mind racing. A condo complex that would require serious money, serious connections. Was Victoria planning to sell my house to fund it? Or was there something else, something tied to David, to the trust, to the secrets he'd hinted at in his letter? The final straw came on a Sunday morning when I woke to the sound of voices in the living room. I dressed quickly, my arthritis protesting, and went downstairs to find Victoria with 3 women, her real estate colleagues, I assumed, standing in my house like it was a property listing. They were taking photos, measuring walls, their voices bright with excitement. This place has incredible bones, Victoria said, her tone professional but smug. But the decor is so outdated. Classic old person style, you know. One of the women, a blonde in expensive boots, nodded. The crown molding is gorgeous, though. Original, from 1987. Victoria said, Tom built this place, but he has no eye for modern design. Look at this wallpaper. I stood at the top of the stairs, unseen, listening, as they dismantled my life's work. The blonde woman continued. You'll need to gut the kitchen. Those cabinets are so 80s. Already planning on it, Victoria said. Tom's moving to a senior community soon, so I'll have full control. Full control. The words hit like a punch. I descended the stairs, my church clothes feeling like armor. The women turned, startled, as I entered the room. Tom, Victoria said, her voice artificially bright. Perfect timing. Meet my colleagues. We're discussing the house's potential. Potential? I said, my voice calm but edged. For what? For renovations, she said as if it were obvious. Once you're settled at Sunset Manor, we'll update this place. Make it market ready. Market ready, I repeated, my eyes on the blonde woman who was now looking uncomfortable. You're planning to sell my house. Victoria's smile tightened. It's not your house, Tom. It's mine. We've discussed this, have we? I asked, stepping closer. I don't recall agreeing to anything. The blonde woman cleared her throat. Maybe we should come back another time. No, it's fine, Victoria said quickly. Tom's just attached. He doesn't see the problems here. The roof leaks, the furnace is ancient. The basement floods every spring. I tilted my head. The roof is fine, the furnace is 2 years old. The basement's been dry for 20 years. Her smile faltered, but she pressed on. Tom, you can't afford to maintain a house this size. Your Social Security barely covers your groceries. And you know this, how I asked, my voice low, dangerous. Because I'm not blind, she snapped, her composure cracking. You drive a beat-up Honda. You wear the same clothes every week. You can't keep living in denial. The room went quiet, the other women shifting awkwardly. I looked at them, their cameras and measuring tapes frozen in their hands. Ladies, I said, before you start planning renovations, you might want to ask Victoria to show you the deed. Victoria's face went white. Tom, don't what I asked? My voice steady. Tell the truth. She opened her mouth, then closed it, clutching her folder tighter. The blonde woman stepped forward. Victoria, maybe we should go. No, Victoria said sharply. Tom understands his situation. He's just struggling. Struggling, I said, my smile cold. You keep using that word, but you're the one struggling, Victoria. Struggling to explain why you think you own a house you've never seen the deed to. The women exchanged glances, their discomfort palpable. I turned and headed for the door, my church shoes clicking on the hardwood I'd laid myself. Enjoy your tour, I said, and left them standing in my living room. Victoria's narrative unraveling with every step I took. That night I sat in the basement, the filing cabinet open before me. David's letter lay on the table, its words a warning I couldn't ignore. She's planning something. I pulled out the folder marked real estate, flipping through the documents, the deed, the construction contract, the tax receipts, all in my name. But my mind kept circling back to the lot next door, 447A. Why was Victoria interested in it? Was it part of her plan to sell my house to fund some grand development scheme? Or was there something else? Something tied to David's warning. I found another document in the cabinet, one I hadn't noticed before, a letter from a real estate developer dated 3 months ago addressed to David. It offered to buy 447A for $200,000, citing its prime location for a condo project. David had never mentioned it to me. Had he discussed it with Victoria? Was this the source of her confidence? The key to her plan? I tucked the letter into my pocket next to David's warning and made a decision. Tomorrow I'd call Margaret Collins, my lawyer. It was time to stop watching and start acting. As I climbed the stairs, I heard a noise, a soft thud from the garage. I froze, my hand on the railing. The house was empty, or so I'd thought. I moved quietly, grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen, and crept to the garage door. It was ajar, the cold night air seeping in. I pushed it open, the beam of light cutting through the darkness, and saw a figure, Victoria, crouched by the stack of boxes containing Margaret's photos and my certificates. She was rifling through them, her movements frantic, as if searching for something specific. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp. She jumped, dropping a photo frame, the glass shattering on the concrete floor. "Tom," she gasped, her face pale. I was just organizing." In the middle of the night I stepped closer, the flashlight steady in my hand. "What are you looking for, Victoria?" Her eyes darted to the folder in her hand, the same manila folder now crumpled at the edges. "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Just helping you pack." I didn't believe her, not for a second. But I didn't push. Not yet. "Go to bed," I said, my voice low. "We'll talk tomorrow." She hesitated, then nodded, clutching the folder as she hurried past me. I waited until her footsteps faded, then bent to pick up the broken frame. It was a photo of David and me taken in the backyard when he was 10, both of us grinning, covered in dirt from planting roses. I held it to the light, my chest tight, and made a promise. Whatever Victoria was hiding, whatever she was planning, I'd find it. And when I did, she'd learn what I'd always known: quiet men aren't weak. They're just selective about when they strike. The night in the garage changed everything. Seeing Victoria crouched among my memories, her hands rifling through Margaret's photos and David's keepsakes, wasn't just a violation, it was a revelation. She wasn't just claiming my house, she was searching for something. Something she thought would cement her victory. That manila folder, crumpled and ever-present, was no longer just a prop. It was a clue, a piece of her puzzle I needed to understand. David's letter burned in my pocket. "She's not who you think. She's planning something." And I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The fuse Victoria had lit at the funeral was burning down, and I had to act before it exploded. I sat in the basement, the filing cabinet open before me, its contents a fortress of truth built over 40 years. The fluorescent bulb overhead buzzed, casting sharp shadows across the concrete floor. My fingers traced the edges of the folders: the deed to 447 Maple Street, purchased in 1987 for $43,000 cash. The trust documents for the Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust, established in 1985, with a current balance of $853, 412 tax receipts, utility bills, insurance policies, all in my name, all meticulously organized. This was my life's work, my legacy, and Victoria thought she could erase it with a wave of her hand and a lie about David's inheritance. But David's letter and the real estate developer's offer for 447A, the vacant lot next door, gnawed at me. They were threads in a web I didn't yet understand. Why was Victoria so interested in that lot? Was it tied to her plan to sell my house to fund some grand development scheme? Or was there something else? Something David had known and tried to warn me about? I needed answers, and I needed them before November 15th, the deadline she'd set for my eviction. I closed the filing cabinet, the key heavy in my hand, and made a plan. First, I'd meet with Margaret Collins, my lawyer, to ensure my legal position was unassailable. Then I'd dig deeper into Victoria's motives, her folder, her late-night search, her questions about 447A. She thought she was playing me, but I was about to change the rules. The next morning I drove to Margaret Collins' office in downtown Cleveland, a modest suite above a coffee shop that smelled of burnt espresso. Margaret, named after my late wife, a coincidence that always felt like a nod from fate, was a no-nonsense attorney with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue. She'd handled the trust since Margaret and I set it up, her signature on every amendment, every disbursement. If anyone could help me navigate this, it was her. She greeted me with a firm handshake, her gray eyes assessing me over wire-rimmed glasses. "Tom," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her cluttered desk, "you look like a man with a fight on his hands." "I am," I said, setting a folder of my own on the desk. Not Victoria's manila one, but a black binder containing the essentials: the deed, the trust documents, David's letter, and the developer's offer for 447A. "Victoria, my daughter-in-law, thinks she owns my house. She's trying to force me out by November 15th. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Your house? The one you built in '87? "The same," I said. "She claims David inherited it when my wife died. Says he was supporting me, that everything's hers now." Margaret leaned back, her fingers steepled. "And you've got the deed?" I slid the black binder toward her. "Deed, trust, documents, tax records, everything. All in my name. No mortgage, no liens, no co-owners." She opened the binder, flipping through the pages with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades untangling legal messes. "This is airtight," she said, tapping the deed. "She has no claim. Did David ever indicate otherwise?" "No," I said, pulling out David's letter. "But he left this. Found it in the filing cabinet. He wrote it 6 months ago, said Victoria was asking questions about the house and the money. Said he didn't trust her. Margaret read the letter, her expression darkening. This is concerning. Sounds like she's been planning something for a while. Any idea what I hesitated, then handed her the developer's letter about 447A. She's been asking about the lot next door. My neighbor said she was talking about a condo project before David's accident. I think it's connected. Margaret frowned, scanning the letter. $200, $1,000 for a vacant lot. That's a steep price for a patch of weeds. Who's the developer? Some outfit called Pinnacle Properties, I said. I don't know much about them. She made a note, her pen scratching against the legal pad. I'll look into it. If Victoria's tied to this, we need to know how. In the meantime, let's lock down your position. I'll draft a formal notice stating you're the sole owner of 447 Maple Street, and Victoria's a tenant at your discretion. She'll have 30 days to vacate if you choose to enforce it. I nodded, the weight in my chest easing slightly. I want her to know the truth, but I want it done right, publicly if possible. She's been spreading lies about me, telling everyone David was supporting me. Margaret's lips quirked into a smile. You want to set the record straight? I can arrange that. We'll schedule a meeting with witnesses, her colleagues maybe. Somewhere she can't dodge the truth. Her office, I said. Premier Realty. She's got a meeting there with her team next week. I want them to see it. Done, Margaret said, jotting another note. Anything else? I hesitated, the image of Victoria in the garage flashing in my mind. She's been searching my things. Last night I caught her in the garage going through boxes of Margaret's photos and my certificates. She's looking for something, maybe proof of her claims. Margaret's eyes narrowed. What she got? A will, a contract? She keeps waving a manila folder around, I said. Won't let it out of her sight. I think it's got something she thinks gives her a claim. Then we need to see it. Margaret said. Legally, we can't force her to show us, but if she's forging documents or misrepresenting David's intentions, we'll nail her. For now, keep your eyes open. If she's searching your things, she's desperate. That's a good sign. I left her office with a plan and a renewed sense of purpose. The truth was on my side, but I needed more than documents. I needed to know what Victoria was hiding, what she was searching for in my garage, what she thought she had in that folder. Back at the house, the air felt charged, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the next move. Victoria wasn't home. She'd left another note, this one curt. Out with clients. Back late. I took advantage of her absence, heading to the garage to inspect the boxes she'd been rifling through. The broken photo frame still lay on the floor, David's boyish grin staring up at me through cracked glass. I picked it up, my chest tight, and set it aside. The boxes were a mess. Margaret's photos and David's keepsakes jumbled together as if she'd been searching in a frenzy. I sifted through them, looking for anything out of place. Most were personal items, photo albums. Margaret's recipe cards, a few of David's old toys, but one box caught my eye. It was newer, unmarked, tucked behind the others. Inside I found a stack of papers, none of them mine. A real estate listing for 447A, the vacant lot, with handwritten notes in Victoria's sharp script. Pinnacle offer $200K. Needs house for full deal. Another page was a draft email to someone named R. Callahan discussing consolidating properties and securing funding. The date was 3 months ago, before David's accident. My pulse quickened. Needs house for full deal. Was Victoria planning to bundle my house with the lot next door? Was that why she was so desperate to claim ownership? I kept digging and found a photocopy of a document, a will, or what looked like one, dated a year ago. It named Victoria as David's sole beneficiary, stating he owned 447 Maple Street, and left it to her. But the signature was wrong. David's handwriting was neat, precise, like mine. This was sloppy. Sloppy, rushed, nothing like his. A forgery. It had to be. but it was enough to explain her confidence, her insistence that the house was hers. She thought she had proof, even if it was fake. I took the photocopy, tucking it into my pocket with David's letter and the developer's offer. This was more than a misunderstanding now. This was a calculated move, and I was starting to see the shape of it. The next day I drove to the public library, a quiet brick building where I could think without Victoria's presence looming over me. I needed to research Pinnacle Properties and this R. Callahan. The librarian, a young man with a nose ring, helped me set up at a computer. A quick search revealed Pinnacle was a Cleveland-based developer known for high-end condos with a reputation for aggressive land acquisitions. R. Callahan was Robert Callahan, their CEO, a man with a trail of lawsuits for shady deals. One article mentioned a stalled project on Maple Street, a condo complex that needed multiple lots to proceed, including 447A and, crucially, 447. The pieces clicked together. Victoria wasn't just after my house for herself. She was working with Pinnacle, or at least trying to sell both my property and the lot next door for a massive payout. The forged will was her leverage, her way to claim ownership and push me out. But why now? Why so soon after David's death? Had she been planning this before the accident? As David's letter suggested, the thought sent a chill down my spine. His accident, a slick road, a midnight crash, had seemed random, tragic. But what if it wasn't? I printed the articles and left my mind racing. I needed to confront Victoria, but not yet. Not until I had every piece of evidence, every angle covered. Margaret Collins would help with the legal side. But I needed to know more about that forged will, about Pinnacle, about what Victoria was hiding in that folder. That evening, Victoria came home late, her heels clicking as she stormed into the kitchen. She didn't see me at first, sitting in the dark, the oak table my anchor. When she flicked on the light, she jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Tom," she snapped. "What are you doing?" "Waiting for you," I said, my voice calm. "We need to talk." She set her manila folder on the counter, her movements deliberate. "I told you we're done talking. You have until November 15th. I leaned forward, my eyes on the folder. "What's in there, Victoria?" "The will you keep talking about." Her face paled, but she recovered quickly. "That's none of your business." "It's my business if it's about my house," I said. "You claim David left it to you. Show me the proof." She hesitated, her fingers twitching toward the folder. "You don't need to see it. David told me everything." "Then why are you searching my things?" I asked, standing slowly. "Last night in the garage." "What were you looking for?" Her eyes widened just for a moment before narrowing into slits. "I was organizing, helping you pack." With a flashlight at midnight, I stepped closer, my voice low. "What's in the folder, Victoria?" She grabbed the folder, clutching it to her chest. "This conversation is over," she said, and stormed out, leaving a trail of perfume and panic. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. Her reaction confirmed what I'd suspected. The folder held her so-called proof, and she was terrified I'd see it. But I already had a piece of it, the photocopied will with its forged signature. And I was starting to see the bigger picture, a plan that stretched beyond my house to the lot next door, to a deal with Pinnacle Properties that could net her millions. The next morning I called Margaret Collins again, updating her with what I'd found: the forged will, the Pinnacle, offer the connection to 447A. "This is bigger than we thought," she said, her voice grim. "If she's forging documents and working with a developer like Callahan, we're talking fraud, maybe worse. I'll dig into Pinnacle's records, see if I can find a link to Victoria. In the meantime, protect those documents of yours. If she's desperate enough to search your garage, she might try something bolder." I spent the day fortifying my defenses. I moved the key documents, deed trust papers, David's letter, to a safe deposit box at the bank, keeping only copies in the basement. I installed a lock on the basement door, a small act of defiance that felt like reclaiming my space. And I kept watching Victoria, noting her late-night phone calls, her hurried departures, the way she avoided my eyes. One evening, I overheard her on the phone in the backyard, her voice low but urgent. "I need more time," she said. He's not budging. Yes, I have the will, but it's not enough. Look, Callahan, we had a deal. She paused listening, then snapped, I'll handle it. Just get the paperwork ready for 447A. I stood by the kitchen window, hidden in the dark, my heart pounding. Callahan. Pinnacle. 447A. It was all connected, and David had known. His letter wasn't just a warning, it was a map to her betrayal. I needed one more piece of evidence, one final nail to seal her fate. And I knew where to find it. The following Sunday, Victoria announced she was hosting a consultation at the house with her real estate colleagues. "We're discussing renovations," she said over breakfast, her tone clipped. "You don't need to be here." "I'll stay," I said, meeting her gaze. "It's my house." She flinched but didn't argue. Instead, she busied herself preparing, setting out coffee and pastries, as if staging a model home. I watched from the den, my presence a quiet challenge. When her colleagues arrived, 3 women in tailored blazers, their voices bright with ambition, I stayed out of sight listening as they praised the house's potential and Victoria's vision. This place could fetch $450,000 with the right upgrades, one said, a brunette with a clipboard, but the old stuff has to go. Already in progress, Victoria said, her voice smug. Tom's moving out soon. He's agreed to a senior community. I stepped into the room, my church shoes silent on the hardwood. "Have I?" I asked, my voice calm but cutting. The women turned, startled. Victoria's smile froze. "Tom," she said, "we're in the middle of something." "So am I," I said, my eyes on the brunette. "Did Victoria show you the deed?" The brunette blinked, confused. "The deed? It's a formality," Victoria said quickly, her voice tight. "The house is mine." "Is it?" I asked, turning to her. "Because I built this house in 1987. Paid cash, no mortgage, no co-owners, just me." The women exchanged glances, their discomfort palpable. The brunette cleared her throat. "Victoria, maybe we should—" "No," Victoria snapped, her composure cracking. "Tom's just confused. He's been through a lot." "Confused," I said, smiling faintly. "That's one word for it." I left them standing there, Victoria's narrative unraveling in front of her colleagues. I didn't need to say more. The seed was planted, and doubt was spreading like wildfire. That night I went back to the basement, the lock on the door, a small victory. I opened the filing cabinet, pulling out the photocopied will I'd found in the garage. David's signature, or the forgery of it, stared up at me, a lie in black ink. I compared it to his letter, the real one, and the difference was stark. The will was a fake, but it was a good one, good enough to fool someone who didn't know David's hand. Had Victoria forged it herself, or had someone helped her? Callahan. Maybe I needed to know, and I needed to know before her November 15th deadline. I called Margaret Collins the next morning, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I found a forged will," I said, laying out the details. "It's in Victoria's folder, or a copy of it. She's been using it to claim the house." Margaret whistled softly. "That's fraud, Tom. If we can prove it, she's done. I've got a lead on Pinnacle. They're desperate for that lot, 447A, and they need your house to make the deal viable. I think Victoria's been working with Callahan, maybe promising him both properties." "Then we set the trap," I said. "Her meeting at Premier Realty next week. I want you there with the documents, deed, trust, everything. We'll show her colleagues, her clients, everyone exactly who owns what." "Done," Margaret said. "But be careful, Tom. If she's forging documents and working with someone like Callahan, she's not just desperate, she's dangerous." I hung up, the weight of her words settling over me. Dangerous. The word echoed David's warning, and for the first time I wondered if his accident had been more than a tragic twist of fate. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the plan. The truth was my weapon, and I was ready to wield it. The days before the meeting were a chess game, each move calculated, each moment charged with tension. Victoria grew bolder, her redecorating more aggressive. She removed the last of Margaret's curtains, replacing them with stark blinds that let in too much light. She boxed up more of David's things, leaving them in the garage like trash. And she kept that folder close, never letting it out of her sight. But I was moving too. I gathered my evidence, the deed, the trust documents, David's letter, the forged will, the Pinnacle offer, and stored them in the safe deposit box, keeping only copies at home. I met with Margaret Collins again, finalizing the notice that would declare Victoria a tenant, not an owner. And I watched Victoria noting her late-night calls, her hurried exits, the way she flinched when I mentioned the deed. One night I found her in the backyard again on the phone with Callahan. "I'm handling it," she hissed. "He doesn't know anything. Just get the contract ready for 447A and we'll close the deal." I stood in the shadows, my heart pounding. The deal. The house, the lot, the forged will. It was all part of a plan she'd set in motion before David's death. And I was the only thing standing in her way. As the meeting at Premier Realty approached, I felt a calm settle over me, the kind that comes before a storm. Victoria thought she'd won, thought her lies, and her folder would carry the day. But I had the truth, deeds, documents, David's warning, and I was ready to use it. She'd underestimated me, seen only an old man in a worn sweater driving a beat-up car. She didn't see the man who'd built a house with his own hands, who'd saved a fortune through discipline and care, who'd spent a lifetime protecting what was his. I looked at David's photo, the one from the broken frame, and made a promise. "I'll protect it, son," I whispered. "Everything you and your mother built. She won't take it." The truth was coming, and when it did, Victoria would learn what I'd always known: quiet men don't break. They wait. And when they strike, they don't miss. The morning of the confrontation dawned cold and gray. The kind of November day that feels like the world is holding its breath. I stood in my bedroom, the house on Maple Street, quiet around me, and dressed with care. My gray suit, the same one I'd worn to David's funeral, felt like armor, now a reminder of what I'd lost, and what I was fighting to keep. In my briefcase I carried the tools of my victory, the deed to 447 Maple Street, the trust documents for the Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust, David's letter, the forged will, and the Pinnacle Properties offer for 447A. Each was a bullet in a chamber, and today I'd fire them all. Victoria's deadline, November 15th, was 3 days away, but I wasn't waiting for her to change the locks. Today at her office in Premier Realty, I'd end this war. Not with shouts or fists, but with the quiet power of truth wielded like a blade. She thought she'd outmaneuvered me, thought her lies and her folder would bury me. But she didn't know me, not the man who'd built this house with his hands, who'd saved a fortune through discipline, who'd spent a lifetime protecting what was his. Today, she'd learn. I drove to Premier Realty in my old Honda Civic, the engine's hum a steady counterpoint to the storm in my chest. The parking lot was full of sleek sedans, a testament to the ambition that pulsed through Victoria's world. I parked in the farthest corner, my briefcase heavy in my hand, and took a moment to steady myself. David's letter was in my pocket, his words a guiding light. "She's not who you think. Protect what you and Mom built. I would, son. I would." The office was a glass and steel shrine to success, all polished surfaces and sharp angles. I stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of coffee and printer ink, and was greeted by a receptionist who barely looked up from her screen. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice clipped. "Victoria's expecting you. Conference room, end of the hall." I nodded, my steps measured as I walked past cubicles filled with agents, tapping away at laptops, their voices a low hum of deals and deadlines. The conference room was a sleek space with a long glass table, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view of downtown Cleveland's gray skyline. Victoria sat at the head of the table, her auburn hair pulled back, her black blazer, tailored to perfection. 3 of her colleagues, the brunette with the clipboard from the house, the blonde in expensive boots, and a third woman I didn't recognize, sat around her, their notebooks open, their faces expectant. A client, an older man in a suit, sat at the far end, his presence an unexpected wild card. Margaret Collins was already there, standing by the window, her briefcase open on a side table. She gave me a nod, her gray eyes sharp with purpose. We'd planned this down to the minute she'd present the legal documents. I'd tell the story. And together we'd unravel Victoria's lies in front of her colleagues and client. The truth would be public, undeniable, and devastating. Tom, Victoria said, her smile tight as I entered. "You're late. Am I?" I said, setting my briefcase on the table. "I thought we were here to discuss the house." Her eyes flickered to my briefcase, a shadow of unease crossing her face. "This is a professional meeting," she said, gesturing to her colleagues. "We're discussing a potential listing. You don't need to be here." "Oh, I think I do," I said, my voice calm but firm. I opened my briefcase, pulling out the black binder containing my documents. "Since it's my house we're talking about." The brunette shifted uncomfortably, her clipboard forgotten. The blonde glanced at Victoria, her brow furrowing. The client, a silver-haired man with a Rolex, leaned forward, intrigued. Victoria's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Tom, we've been over this. The house is mine. David left it to me." "Did he?" I asked, sliding the deed across the table. "This says otherwise." The room went silent. The only sound, the faint hum of the heating system. Victoria stared at the deed, her fingers tightening on her manila folder, the one she'd clutched like a lifeline for weeks. The brunette picked up the deed, scanning it quickly. "Thomas Mitchell," she read aloud. "Sole owner, purchased March 15, 1987. No co-owners, no liens." Victoria's face paled, but she forced a laugh. "That's outdated. David inherited the house when his mother died. It's in his will." "Then let's see it," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "Show us the will." She hesitated, her fingers twitching on the folder. The blonde leaned forward, her voice tentative. "Victoria, do you have it?" "Of course I do," Victoria snapped, opening the folder with a flourish. She pulled out a document, a single sheet, the same one I'd found in the garage, and slid it across the table. "Here, David's will naming me as his sole beneficiary." I took the document, my hands steady despite the anger simmering inside me. The signature was wrong, just as I'd known. I pulled David's letter from my pocket, placing it beside the will. "This is David's handwriting," I said, pointing to the letter. "This is how he signed his name, neat, precise. Now look at the will." Margaret Collins stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "I've reviewed the alleged will," she said, holding up a copy I'd given her. "The signature is inconsistent with David Mitchell's known handwriting. It's a forgery." The client's eyebrows shot up, his interest now fully piqued. The brunette and blonde exchanged glances, their discomfort growing. Victoria's face flushed, her voice rising. "That's ridiculous. This is David's will. He told me the house was mine." "Then why didn't he tell me?" I asked, my voice low but piercing. "I built that house in 1987, Victoria. Paid cash, no mortgage. I've paid every tax bill, every utility, every repair. David never owned it. He never paid a dime." The room was a pressure cooker now, the air thick with doubt. The third woman, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "Victoria, you said the house was yours free and clear. You promised us a listing." "It is," Victoria said, her voice cracking. "Tom's just confused. He's been struggling since David died." "Struggling," I said, pulling out the trust documents. "Let's talk about that." The Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust, established in 1985. Current balance $853,401. David was a beneficiary, not an owner. The trust is mine, as is the house. And the life insurance policy, $150,000 payable to the trust, not to you. Margaret slid a copy of the trust documents across the table, her voice calm but unyielding. "These are legal notarized records. Thomas Mitchell is the sole trustee and owner. Victoria, you have no claim to the property or the funds." The client stood, his face darkening. "You told me this was a done deal, Victoria. I was ready to invest in your Maple Street project." "Maple Street project?" I asked, my eyes narrowing. I pulled out the Pinnacle Properties letter, sliding it toward him. You mean the condo development? The one that needs my house and the lot next door? 447? Victoria froze her eyes wide with panic. The brunette gasped, her clipboard clattering to the table. Victoria, you said the house was yours to sell. You didn't mention a partner. There is no partner, I said, my voice steady. Victoria's been working with Pinnacle Properties, promising them my house and the adjacent lot for a condo deal. She forged a will to make it happen. That's a lie, Victoria shouted, standing so fast her chair tipped back. You can't prove that. Then show us what's in the folder, I said, pointing to the manila folder still clutched in her hand. If it's not a forgery, let's see it. The room was deathly silent, every eye on Victoria. Her colleagues stared, their trust in her crumbling. The client crossed his arms, his expression one of betrayal. Margaret leaned forward, her voice like steel. Ms. Mitchell, if you have legitimate documents, produce them now. Otherwise, I'll be filing a fraud complaint by the end of the day. Victoria's hands shook the folder, trembling in her grip. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I made a mistake. A mistake, I said, stepping closer. You told everyone I was a burden, that David supported me, that you owned my house. You forged a will, Victoria. You tried to steal my home, my legacy. I didn't forge it, she cried, tears welling in her eyes. David, he promised me. He said the house would be mine. Then why didn't he tell me? I asked, my voice cutting through her tears. Why did he write this? I held up his letter, reading aloud. She's not who you think. She's been asking questions about the house, the money. I don't trust her. The blonde gasped, her hand covering her mouth. The brunette stood backing away from the table. The client shook his head, muttering, unbelievable. Victoria's tears spilled over, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of defeat. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought it was mine. You thought you could take it, I said, my voice low but firm. You thought I was weak, an old man with nothing to fight for. But you were wrong. Margaret stepped forward, placing a formal notice on the table. Victoria Mitchell, you are hereby notified that you are a tenant at 447 Maple Street with no legal claim to the property. You have 30 days to vacate. Failure to comply will result in legal action. The room erupted in whispers, the colleagues exchanging shocked looks. The client stormed out, muttering about wasted time. Victoria sank into her chair, the manila folder falling to the table, its contents spilling out, notes, printouts, the forged will, and a contract draft with Pinnacle Properties signed by Robert Callahan. I picked up the contract, scanning it quickly. It outlined a deal to sell both 447 Maple Street and 447A for $1.2 million with Victoria as the broker, and a 10% commission. My house, my legacy reduced to a line item in her scheme. You were going to sell my home, I said, my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. You forged a will, lied to everyone, and thought you'd get away with it. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, her voice small. I needed the money. David's accident, the bills, it was too much. Don't use David as an excuse, I said, my voice sharp. You were planning this before he died. He knew. He warned me. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. What do you mean? I didn't answer. The seed of doubt about David's accident was there, but I wasn't ready to voice it, not yet. Instead, I gathered my documents, tucking them back into my briefcase. You have 30 days, I said. Use them wisely. I turned to leave Margaret at my side, her presence a quiet reassurance. The colleagues stared, their whispers following us out. Victoria remained at the table, her head in her hands, the ruins of her plan scattered around her. As we stepped into the cold November air, Margaret clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did good, Tom. She's got nothing left to stand on. Not yet, I said, my eyes on the horizon. There's still one question unanswered. She raised an eyebrow. What's that David's accident? I said, my voice low. It was too convenient. too perfect for her plan. Margaret's expression darkened. "You think she—" "I don't know," I said, "but I'm going to find out." We parted ways and I drove home, the weight of the confrontation lifting, but replaced by a new burden. The truth about the house was out, but David's letter— "She's not who you think" suggested there was more to uncover. The forged will, the pinnacle, deal the questions about 447A. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that might stretch beyond fraud to something darker. Back at the house, I sat at the kitchen table, David's photo in front of me. The broken frame was gone, replaced by a new one I'd bought that morning. His boyish grin stared back, a reminder of why I'd fought. I opened my briefcase, spreading out the documents, the deed, the trust, the forged will, the pinnacle contract. They told a story, but not the whole one. Victoria's desperation, her late-night searches, her calls to Callahan. They pointed to a plan that had started long before David's death. And his letter, written 6 months ago, suggested he'd seen it coming. I stood the key to the filing cabinet heavy in my pocket and went to the basement. The lock on the door was new, a small victory against Victoria's intrusions. I opened the cabinet, checking the remaining folders for anything I'd missed. Most were familiar tax records, insurance policies, but one caught my eye, tucked at the back of the bottom drawer. It was a thin file labeled miscellaneous, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a single sheet, a handwritten note from David dated a year ago. It wasn't a letter, just a list. Talk to Dad about Victoria. Check trust terms. Look into Pinnacle. Accident. The last word stopped me cold. Accident. Had David suspected something even then? Had he known his life was in danger? I sat back, the note trembling in my hands. The pieces were falling into place, but they raised more questions than answers. Victoria's plan, the forged will, the Pinnacle deal. They were all connected, but how? And what did David's death have to do with it? I needed more evidence, something concrete to tie her to his accident, if there was anything to tie. The next day I called a private investigator, a contact Margaret recommended. His name was Jack Riley, a grizzled ex-cop with a reputation for digging up truths others wanted buried. I met him at a diner on the edge of town, sliding David's note and the Pinnacle contract across the table. "I need you to look into this," I said. "Victoria Mitchell, Pinnacle Properties, Robert Callahan, and David's accident. It was ruled a single-car crash, but I'm not so sure." Jack scanned the documents, his eyes narrowing. "You think she had something to do with it?" "I don't know," I said, "but David suspected something. I need to know what." He nodded, tucking the papers into his jacket. "Give me a week. If there's anything to find, I'll find it." I left the diner, the weight of the confrontation still fresh, but now mixed with a new resolve. Victoria's lies had been exposed. Her plan dismantled, but the question of David's death loomed larger than ever. I drove home, the house on Maple Street waiting for me, its walls a testament to the life I'd built and the truth I'd defended. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Victoria's SUV, its headlights off, parked crookedly as if she'd left in a hurry. The front door was ajar, the living room dark. I stepped inside, my senses on edge, and found a note on the kitchen table, scrawled in her handwriting. "I'm sorry, Tom. I was wrong. I'll be gone by tomorrow." I stood there, the note in my hand, and felt a strange mix of triumph and unease. She was leaving her plan in ruins, but her apology felt hollow. David's note, accident, echoed in my mind. She'd lost the house, the money, her reputation, but what else was she hiding? I wouldn't rest until I knew. I went to the basement, locking the door behind me, and opened the filing cabinet one last time. The documents were safe, the truth secure, but David's warning was a shadow I couldn't shake. The war was won, but the battle for answers was just beginning. The house on Maple Street felt different the morning after the confrontation at Premier Realty. The silence was no longer oppressive, but peaceful, as if the walls themselves had exhaled, relieved of the weight of Victoria's lies. I stood in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. the oak table beneath my fingers a steady reminder of the life I'd fought to protect. Outside, the November sky was clear, the fog that had clung to Cleveland for weeks finally lifting. It was a new day, and for the first time since David's death, I felt a flicker of hope. Victoria's note. "I'm sorry, Tom. I was wrong. I'll be gone by tomorrow," lay crumpled on the counter, its words hollow but final. She'd left that night, her SUV packed with suitcases, her departure as hurried as her schemes. I'd watched from the porch, my heart a tangle of triumph and sorrow. She'd tried to take everything, my home, my legacy, my dignity, but she'd lost it all. Yet the victory wasn't as sweet as I'd expected. David's letter, with its chilling final word, accident, still haunted me, a shadow I couldn't shake. The war for my house was won, but the battle for the truth about my son's death was far from over. The days that followed were a whirlwind of consequences, not just for Victoria, but for the community she'd tried to manipulate. Word of the confrontation at Premier Realty spread like wildfire through Cleveland's tight-knit real estate circles. By noon the next day, Helen Davis called, her voice a mix of shock and admiration. "Tom, it's all over town," she said. "Victoria's colleagues are furious. They say she misrepresented deals, lost a major client. Her reputation's in tatters." I stood in the living room, Margaret's photos back on the mantel where they belonged, and nodded. She made her choices. "Helen, choices have consequences." "They sure do," she said. "I heard she's leaving Cleveland. Got a job offer in Columbus, some small agency willing to take a chance on her. She's selling her condo to cover debts." I thanked Helen and hung up the news, settling over me like dust. Victoria's fall was swift, but it wasn't enough. Not when David's warning lingered, not when the question of his accident remained unanswered. I'd hired Jack Riley, the private investigator, to dig deeper, and I was waiting for his call. Until then, I focused on reclaiming my home. I spent the weekend undoing Victoria's changes. I hung Margaret's curtains, their floral pattern catching the light like a memory of her smile. I unpacked David's childhood drawings, pinning them back on the refrigerator. I pulled my old CPA certificates from the garage, dusting them off and hanging them in the den. Each act was a small victory, a step toward restoring the life she'd tried to erase. But as I worked, I kept seeing that manila folder, its contents spilling across the conference table at Premier Realty, the forged will, the pinnacle, contract, the proof of her betrayal. And I kept hearing David's voice. "She's not who you think." 3 days later, Jack Riley called. I met him at the same diner, its greasy air and chipped Formica tables, a stark contrast to the polished world of Premier Realty. Jack slid into the booth across from me, his weathered face grim. "Got something for you, Tom," he said, pushing a thin file across the table. "It's not everything, but it's a start." I opened the file, my hands steady, despite the knot in my chest. Inside were phone records, emails, and a police report from David's accident. "What am I looking at?" I asked. Victoria was in contact with Robert Callahan for months before David's death, Jack said, pointing to the emails. "They were planning the Maple Street deal, your house and 447A. She promised Pinnacle she could deliver both properties, but she needed David out of the way." My blood ran cold. "Out of the way," Jack nodded, his voice low. "The accident report's clean, single car crash, wet road, no witnesses. But I found something odd. Victoria's phone pinged a tower near the crash site that night, an hour before it happened. She told police she was home." I stared at the report, the words blurring. "She was there," maybe Jack said. "Could be coincidence. Could be she followed him, knew his route. No proof of foul play yet. But I'm digging into Callahan. He's got a history of bending the law. If there's a connection, I'll find it." I leaned back, the diner's noise fading to a hum. David's accident, the forged will, the Pinnacle deal. It was all part of a web, and Victoria was at its center. But was she capable of more than fraud? Had she crossed a line I couldn't yet prove? "Keep looking," I said, sliding the file back. "I need to know." Jack nodded, his eyes steady. "I will, but be careful, Tom. She's desperate now. Desperate people do desperate things. That evening I sat at the kitchen table, David's photo in its new frame staring back at me. The house was mine again, its memories restored, but the victory felt incomplete. Victoria was gone, her plans in ruins, but the question of David's death lingered like a wound that wouldn't heal. I'd won the battle for my home, but the war for the truth was still raging. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find Victoria standing on the porch, a cardboard box in her arms. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, her usual polish replaced by a weary fragility. "Tom," she said, her voice soft. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in. She set the box on the table, its contents familiar, more of David's things, Margaret's recipe cards, a few photos I hadn't seen in years. "I found these in my condo," she said, her voice trembling. "They belong here, with you." I looked at the box, my heart tightening. "Why now?" I asked. She swallowed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was wrong, Tom. About everything. The house, the money, the way I treated you. I got caught up in the deal in Pinnacle's promises. I thought I could make something big. Something David would have been proud of." "David," I said, my voice sharp, "don't use his name to justify your lies." She flinched but nodded. "You're right," I lied. "I forged the will. I thought if I could convince everyone the house was mine, I could close the deal with Callahan. But I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted a way out of what I asked." Stepping closer. "David's death. The accident you were near?" Her eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. "What are you talking about?" "Your phone," I said, my voice low. "It was near the crash site that night. You told the police you were home." She shook her head, her tears falling faster. "I was there, but not like that. I was following him. We'd fought about the house, the deal. He was angry, said he'd never sell. I wanted to talk to fix it. But then, the crash happened. I saw it, Tom. I couldn't stop it." I studied her, searching for the truth in her eyes. Was she lying again, or was this the first honest thing she'd said? "Why didn't you tell the police?" I asked. "I was scared," she whispered. "I thought they'd blame me. I didn't do anything, Tom. I swear. I wanted to believe her, but David's accident kept me from it." "You have 30 days," I said, my voice steady. "But if I find out you had anything to do with his death, there won't be a place far enough for you to run." She nodded, her shoulders sagging, and left without another word. The box sat on the table, a peace offering I didn't fully trust. I opened it, finding a photo of David and me planting roses, his smile bright against the summer sun. I held it, my chest tight, and made a promise. I'd keep digging, keep fighting, until I knew the whole truth. The weeks that followed were a return to normalcy, or as close as I could get. Victoria moved to Columbus, her condo sold at a loss, her career in Cleveland. A memory. Premier Realty replaced her with a new agent, and her colleagues spoke of her in hushed tones, a cautionary tale of ambition gone wrong. I restored the house fully, Margaret's curtains swaying in the breeze, David's drawings brightening the fridge. The filing cabinet stayed locked, its contents safe, but I kept David's letter close, a reminder of the fight not yet finished. Jack Riley called again a month later, his voice grim. "No hard evidence on the accident," he said. "No tampering with the car, no witnesses. But Callahan's dirty Tom. He's been dodging taxes, bribing officials. I found emails suggesting he pressured Victoria to deliver your house, but nothing tying her directly to the crash. Could be she's telling the truth. She was there but didn't cause it." I thanked him, the weight of uncertainty settling over me. I might never know if David's death was more than an accident, but I'd keep the file open, keep Jack on the case. For now I had my home, my memories, my truth. One evening I sat on the porch, a glass of iced tea in my hand, the roses David and I had planted blooming in the yard. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet, the kind that comes from peace, not tension. I thought about Victoria, about her tears, her apology, her fall. She'd underestimated me, seen only an old man in a worn sweater driving a beat-up car. She hadn't seen the man who'd built a life with Margaret, who'd raised a son with love, who'd fought with the quiet strength of truth. I thought about David, his letter, his warning. I might never know the full story of his death, but I knew he'd trusted me to protect what we'd built, and I had. The house, the trust. The memories, they were mine not because of documents or dollars, but because of the life they represented. I learned something through all this, something I'd always known but never fully articulated. Strength isn't in shouting or fighting or proving yourself to the world. It's in knowing who you are, in holding fast to what matters, in waiting for the right moment to strike. Victoria thought she could take that from me, but she was wrong. And in her defeat I found something else, forgiveness not for her sake but for mine. I could let go of the anger, the pain, and still hold my ground. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, I raised my glass to the house, to Margaret, to David. "We did it," I whispered. We held on. The roses swayed in the breeze, and for the first time in months I felt at peace.